Woody Allen, née Konigsberg, was born in Brooklyn in 1935 and grew up in the Midwood section. In fact, he attended Midwood High School, the school of where my three children were educated. Woody Allen was not a great student. He played hooky often, preferred magic tricks to studying math and history. He also was, contrary to his later image as a nebbish, he was an excellent athlete in baseball and in boxing. He actually engaged in Golden Glove boxing. Nevertheless, he tried, like Mel Brooks, higher education, and he didn't last very long. He sort of dropped out of NYU, and he used it later as a comic shtick. He said, I was flunked out of school because I cheated. I looked into the boy next to me, I looked into his soul, and I stole it. Something to that effect. And Woody Allen then began sending jokes to Earl Wilson, the Yenta newspaper man who worked for many years for the New York Post. Gaining traction as a joke writer brought him to the attention of Sid Caesar. And Caesar, who had this great stable of outstanding writers, including Mel Brooks and Mel Tolkien and Lucille Callan and Larry Gelbart, now added this red-headed runt, as they called him, Woody Allen. And he gained his experience. He also worked the Catskills briefly and then moved to a different venue, the Poconos, where he befriended other comedians and became a stand-up comedian in spite of himself. He was very nervous. I'll never forget, I saw him at the bitter end, and he could not really feel comfortable in that role. He would joke about himself. He said that he grew up in a dysfunctional family. He wanted a dog, but his parents, all they could afford was an ant. And in a burst of anger, his father stepped on the ant, and that was the end of his pet life. He said that later on he was mugged several times, and he moved into an apartment with a security guard, and he was mugged by the security guard. He said he went to camp, an interdenominational camp, and he was assaulted by every young camper there, despite their color, creed, or religion. He was a target. He said he went with a woman who had a future child. She was a drug addict, and so when she got married, he bought her an ideal present, spoons. So he could make fun of others, he could make fun of himself. He hit his stride by telling jokes of this kind. He said, I was married to my first wife. Her name was Rosen, and she was so immature, she sunk the boats in my bathtub. She and I had a problem. In New York City, you can't get a divorce according to state law unless one of the partners commits adultery. So I volunteered. From that point on, his ex-wife sued him for using her as his comic material. And he started an affair, one of many, with Diane Keaton, who became one of his great co-partners in the film business. He was discovered by a film factory, you might say, Charles Rollins and Jaffe, who said to Woody, we want you to do a parody of James Bond. And so he went to London, where he gambled successfully and made a terrible movie, but at least he got his feet wet. Then he went to Jerry Lewis, who he had befriended, and said, Jerry, I want you to direct my next film. Take the money and run. And Jerry Lewis told him, Woody, you have the talent to do it yourself. And he did. And the success is well known today. After that, he wanted to do a movie called Annie Hall. This is 1977, which eventually won many Academy Awards. Again, he asked Jerry Lewis to direct, and Lewis refused. In that film, there's this Jewish juxtaposition with the Goyish, something that Jackie Mason would later play on to great effect. And in one scene, he's trying to capture a lobster, and he can't do it because it's treif. And he tells Diane Keaton, listen, you're Goyish, this is a Goyish thing, you capture the lobster and put it in the pot. In that film, there are two jokes that are signature Woody Allen jokes. One is the adventure of life in brief. Life is terrible. Life is like the food at a cheap Catskill hotel, but we want extra portions of this terrible food. And then the second joke that typifies Woody Allen's sense of humor, his bizarre sense of humor, is he goes to a psychiatrist and he says, you know, my brother thinks he's a chicken. And the psychiatrist advises, you should have him sent to a mental institution. And he replies, no, doctor, I can't have him sent to a mental institution because we need the eggs. So the surrealistic comedy is something that Woody Allen brought to bear on his filmmaking. Woody Allen, of course, is now a marked man for his alleged abuse of his adopted daughter, Dylan. And therefore, he cannot make movies anymore. But if anyone deserves accolades for bringing Jewish humor to a national audience, it's Woody Allen, a man whose roots are deeply embedded in Brooklyn soil and who uses humor as a club to beat off his enemies in a very hostile world. Because not only do we need the eggs, we need the jokes as well.